Hey everyone, Benny Lewis from Fluent in 3 Months, and I have a special guest today. I'm with Olly from I Will Teach You a Language.
How's it going?
And I'm very happy to be recording in London today with Olly because I wanted to ask him some questions. The first of which is, how do you not forget words when you're learning a language?
It's funny, isn't it? Vocabulary, memorizing words. So I think really the key for this is to take a lot of different, for me, I take a lot of different angles to it and I kind of see what works. You know, so like sometimes it might be a case of trying to create some kind of word association. Seeing what the word sounds like in that language or in other languages, maybe trying to relate it to English. And then it might be a case of sometimes, you know, just reading it or seeing it or hearing it more times might help it to stick. And other times, you know, I will transfer it over to flashcards and I'll use flashcards to kind of bring the word back from time to time, because then you can just let time do the work. You know.
Next question I wanted to ask Olly is, what do you think about reading aloud? Do you think that's helpful when you're learning a language?
Here's the thing. When you're reading aloud a text, when you've got the text in front of you and you're reading aloud, it has nothing to do with a real life scenario where you're speaking a language. Because when you're actually speaking a foreign language, you have got to, you're thinking on the fly, you're reacting to the other person, there's so many things at play. And so reading aloud doesn't help you to prepare for that at all. But there is one thing that reading aloud is really good for, which is to help you with your pronunciation and your articulation of words. Because you have to read, you've got to really form the words, articulate them clearly, maybe try to bring some good intonation into the sentences and the things that you're reading. So if you want to work on your pronunciation, then it can be a really great thing to do over and over. But other than that, it's not something that I see a great deal of value in.
All right, very good. Next question. Can I learn 2 languages at the same time?
Wow, what a question. Well, I mean, the obvious answer is you can. You know, nothing's stopping you going down to Foyles here on Charing Cross Road and, you know, buying up 10 books of 10 different languages and learning them all at the same time. You can, people do. Yeah. The thing that it does is it just takes attention away from the primary language that you want to learn. And as soon as you remove attention and focus, that's when you just start to make less progress all around. So what I would advise is to say, okay, spend 80% of your time on the main language, so that's your focus, and then that 20% of time, treat it as kind of playtime, and you know, you can dabble in something else at the same time. But definitely try to think of the one language that you are most wanting to focus on and devote your time to that.
Yeah, and I've also found whenever I'm starting off in a language, I'm more likely to mix it up with other ones. So I've not really attempted to learn new languages. Yeah. But if you're a beginner, I find that some of the words from one language they end up creeping up into the next one.
I think it is an interesting distinction, that thing between learning a language or maintaining a language. I think one tip that could be useful for people is, if you are learning 2 languages at the same time, try to, if possible, if this fits within your interests, make sure they're from different language families. So, you know, if you try to learn Spanish and Portuguese at the same time, you're going to get really confused. But if you learn Spanish and Japanese, they're different enough that you'll probably find it easier to keep them separate in your brain.
How do you maintain multiple languages? You know, we've already mentioned how you might learn 2 initially, but you've already learned a language to a certain level. What do you do if you don't want to lose it and you're doing it with multiple languages?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something a lot of people worry about actually when they are wanting to pick up more than one language. I think that for me, I've always found that the key to maintaining a language and not forgetting it is to make sure that you reach a certain level in the first place. Once you're at for me, it's around a B2 level. Once I get there, B2 level for me is where you can go to the pub with a native speaker and enjoy chatting with them. Like without, you know, as they would a friend. Like that's kind of B2 level. You're comfortable talking, have no particular problems. You're not perfect, but you're strong and you're comfortable. If you can speak your language to that level, it's actually surprisingly hard to forget it. So, you know, even with languages that I don't speak or don't practice very often, I usually find that just like 10-15 minutes of conversation is enough to bring it right back. So I'd say the number one thing is to, before you move on to another language, get your primary language to a strong kind of B2 level.
Yeah, definitely. I found the same. I found that there's kind of like a half-life with learning a language, that if I get to the B1 level, It's useful, it's great. There's many things you can do at B1 level, but the catch is, after a few months, I feel like I'm down to A2.
Yeah.
Whereas with the B2 level, you can lose it, but I think you can take a longer period of time where you might be focusing on a new language. And so I agree, you have to push it up. It's like you were saying before, focus on one language, get it to a B2 level at least, and then it'll be easier to maintain.
And then the second thing is, and this is something I'm trying to do right now, is make sure you kind of create regular opportunities to practice. So I make time certainly every couple of weeks to sit down with someone and spend an evening or spend a couple of hours speaking, and that's enough.
Okay, so you got started learning language, you get your momentum up, but then you get stuck in a plateau. You're intermediate and you might feel like you're going to be there forever. But what can you do to push yourself up a notch and get to a high level in a language?
Yeah, so I think the important concept to understand about the intermediate plateau, as they call it, is that you can't keep doing the same things that you were doing when you were a beginner. Right at the beginning, you feel like you're making tons of progress every day. At an intermediate level, that feeling of progress has stopped, but it's still going, it's still occurring, you're still making progress. So I think the key is to have that, you've got to have this larger, wider, longer term mindset, and you've got to say, right, now's the time to dig my heels in, I'm going to keep going, whatever I feel like, and I'm just going to spend as much time with the language as possible. And for me, that means moving slightly away from the kind of concept of studying, a more formal sit-down desk time, if you like, and more towards an attitude of, right, I'm going to take this language and integrate it in my life. I'm going to find friends, I'm going to listen to music, I'm going to watch movies, I'm going to read books. Spend as much time as possible with the language, and then you will just find that you adopt the language as your own, and you will just learn naturally, as long as you give it time.
Yeah, definitely. And I totally agree that you need to change your approach. So for me personally, I'm all about speaking, speak, to get up to that intermediate stage. But I find I make better progress when I'm reading, or if I am speaking, I'm not just going to a social event and saying, how was your week? I'm like pushing myself to get on like italki with a teacher and actually have a debate, So what can you do if you don't have time to learn language?
Yeah. Well, clearly, like, the more time you have, the more time you're going to be able to devote to language learning. But what I often find is that when you have this conversation with people and they say, I really don't have time, when you dig deeper into what they're actually doing, you often find that this kind of panic about not having enough time means that you don't actually end up spending any useful time on the language at all. The first thing to say is you need to have, I find it helpful to have one fixed time every day, what I call my core study time. So that's like language learning time every day that's non-negotiable. Like, that's my time to study. Personally, I like to do it first thing in the morning, that's before the day starts, so I stay fresh and don't get distracted. And, if you've only got 15 minutes, so be it. But you can probably work out a bit more time, like 30, 45 minutes maybe. And if you can do that, if you can get to the point where you've got, say, 30 minutes, 45 minutes every day where you are really concentrated and focused on the task of learning, that is plenty of time. And then from then on, it's just a question of, I think, looking at your day and thinking, okay, where do I have dead time? Do I commute? Most of us commute, right? What can I be doing on the train? Can I be listening? Can I be reading? Do I have 15 minutes at lunch to go over some flashcards? With a combination of that core study time in the morning or wherever you like to do it, plus finding these little pockets of time throughout the day, with a bit of thought and attention, you can carve out a surprising amount of time in your day. But it takes a bit of work and it takes a bit of thought.
Yeah, like, you can do simple things. You can change your Facebook language. Even if you're playing computer games to relax, you could change the language on your gaming system so that you see all of the notifications.
Yeah.
There's so many ways you can fill up your day with the language.
And stop watching TV in English. Watch it in the target language instead.
Okay, so let's say you've got your conversational stage up and you're confident enough, but you still have a strong accent. How can you reduce it?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. Like, accent is important, or I guess we should say pronunciation, really, because this is the first step. Even if you're starting a new language, you've got to get your pronunciation right from the beginning. Don't try not to get to the point where you've been learning for years and you still haven't paid attention to your pronunciation, because it's a lot easier to learn it properly up front than it is to unlearn bad habits later on. But beyond that, the thing about accent is that accent is not really a case of speaking correctly or like a native speaker, because as you're listening to us speaking now, I don't speak the same way as Benny. Benny has a charming Irish accent. I've got a kind of posh BBC English accent. We both speak different ways, right? But which is correct? Obviously mine. But but the point is that you can speak differently and be completely fluent in every way. And I think the number one rule for all things to do with accents and pronunciation is that you have to be able to hear it before you can actually say it and produce it. So the other thing, I think, you can take what we're saying here and 10 people could get very different results. The people who will get the best results, I think, are those people who go out and really listen and really pay attention. That Brazilian guy, when he's speaking, like how does his voice go? What does he do with his intonation? How does he speak? Like, pay attention and try to adopt that into your own language. That's really, I think, what it's about.
And I think that's the kind of thing that you can get great help from a native speaker.
Yeah.
It could be an experienced teacher, but try it and get feedback, because there's a lot of sounds that you might not be as used to distinguishing, but it's something you can learn. You could definitely learn to reduce your accent. So great answers to those questions. And if you want to hear more from Olly, then click him right now to go to his channel. You'll see a link to his YouTube channel. He's got loads of great videos there. And he's also got an excellent podcast. Search for I Will Teach You a Language on the usual iTunes and so on. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming over, Olly. And I will have to pop over to your channel.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Can't wait.